여러분, 일요일 아침입니다. 지금 11시가 넘었는데, 이제 코로나는 확진자 수가 3,500명이 넘었어요. 와, 그 베트남의 더하남 리조트는 끝까지 취소 안 해줍니다. 에바종 더하남 리조트. 진짜 환불 받아낼 거예요, 진짜. 예? 지금 그 찾아보면은 다른 사이트에서 더안함을 예약한 사람들은 취소를 받아내신 분들이 몇 분이 있는 것 같아요. 인터넷에 보면은. 근데 에바종이랑 더안함은 안 해줍니다. 더안함 쪽에다가 메일을 보내면은 에바종이랑 얘기를 하라 그러고, 에바종이 취소를 해줘야 된다 그러고, 에바종에서는 더안함에 취소를 해줘야 된다 그러고, 그래서 또 더안함에다가 당신들이 취소를 하라고 에바종에다 말을 해줘라 라고 메일을 보냈더니 그냥 또 매크로 답변이 또 옵니다. 아무튼 그래서 오늘 다시 또 에바종에다가 글을 남겨놨어요. 쪽지를 메일을 보냈습니다. 지금 현 상황이 이런데 끝까지 취소를 안 해줄 거냐. 답장 만약에 내일 또 오면 또 안 된다고 하겠죠, 무조건. 아니 그냥 내 개인 변심에 의한 환불이 아니고 이렇게 베트남에서 입국을 막고 있는데, 얼마 아까 전에 방금 뉴스 나왔는데 호치민에서도 그 착륙 불허를 내렸다고 하죠. 일단 스트레칭 조금 하고 운동하고 점심 먹겠습니다. 졸려.
Completely contradicting.
From your man in Washington,
It's all food for thought when you in the public are trying to decide who to trust.
who won't back down.
Look at the headwinds that congressional Republicans already are facing. A monumental day in our politics.
The Lead with Jake Tapper, Tuesday through Saturday on CNN.
Mackenzie in Goma, Eastern DRC, and this is CNN.
All right, let's take another key race alert right now. Look at this blowout win for Joe Biden with 48.5% to Bernie Sanders, only 19.9%. But take a look at this. He's beating Bernie Sanders with 86% of the vote in by 122,000 votes. That's so impressive for the former vice president. Tom Steyer, who just announced he's dropping out, 11.4%. Pete Buttigieg, 8.1%. Everybody else in relatively low single digits. Let's go over to David Chalian and take a look at the all-important delegate count right now. Biden, as a result of South Carolina, he's gaining some significant numbers of delegates.
There's no doubt about it, Wolf. And 54 delegates at stake tonight in South Carolina, the biggest delegate haul of the first 4 states. Take a look at what we've been able to allocate so far to the candidates. Joe Biden tonight, so far getting 26 delegates, compared to Bernie Sanders getting 8. They are the only 2 to get delegates so far. And look at what a huge delegate win that is so far. We still have 20 delegates of the 54 not yet assigned, and we'll look as the vote continues to come in. But the big Biden win is also giving him a big delegate haul tonight over Sanders.
It was impressive because even the polls didn't show a blowout win like this, did it?
Well, no, I mean, there was a poll earlier in the week, I think, that only had Joe Biden with a 5-point lead. Then we saw a poll later in the week that had him with a 20-point lead. This is even greater than that.
Here are the delegates to date.
Yeah, and take a look. You needed 1,991 to win the nomination. That's the number that these are going to add up to. The person that gets to 1991, if someone gets to 1991, will be the Democratic nominee of Milwaukee. Right now, Bernie Sanders with 53 delegates so far to date. Look who's right behind him by only 12 delegates now. Joe Biden. He's at 41, and that is because he leapfrogged over Pete Buttigieg and is getting close to Sanders because of the big win in South Carolina. Buttigieg with 26, Warren with 8, Klobuchar with 7. Keep your eyes on Sanders versus Biden as the rest of those 20 delegates get allocated tonight.
Very interesting indeed. And speaking, Dana and John, of Sanders versus Biden, we all listened very closely to Joe Biden's victory speech tonight in South Carolina, and there were several moments where he really went after Bernie Sanders, didn't mention him by name, but it was clear who he was referring to. Listen to this.
That the Democrats want a nominee who's a Democrat. A lifelong Democrat. A proud Democrat. An Obama-Biden Democrat. Join us.
As all of us know, Bernie Sanders, Dana, he's an independent who caucuses in the U.S. Senate as with the Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, that was most likely supposed to be about Bernie Sanders, but it also could have been about Mike Bloomberg,
Right.
who was an independent and a Republican. Yeah, it was a twofer. And but what wasn't ambiguous at all was one of the next things he said, which is he said, most Americans don't want the promise of revolution. They want more than promises. They want results. That was about Bernie Sanders. And, you know, we heard a lot of talking from my colleagues in the other studio about how compassionate he was, how energized he was keeping Biden in his speech tonight. The best speech he's given of his campaign by far. But it wasn't just because of the energy and the adrenaline. It was because he was so pointed and so clear about who his target was and is, and who he knows he needs to beat, and that is Bernie Sanders. And it is not going to be easy when you look at the delegates. But the fact that he articulated that in a way that he hasn't so far was really noteworthy.
And energy and confidence in political communication helps.
Yeah.
And so the fact that the ghosts had been excised from the Biden closet, if you will. This is the third time he's run for president. It's the first time he's won a primary. You could see that. You could just see the happiness in his face, the joy in his face, the confidence in his face. Does that carry over? We'll find out Tuesday, on Super Tuesday when 14 states vote. But it helps a lot to the optics if you look confident, if you do not look shaky, if you're not looking over your shoulder. And that was a very confident Joe Biden tonight. I do think it gives him unquestionable momentum, a 30-point win in South Carolina. He was expected to win. I don't know how many people thought he was going to win by 30 points. So that gives you momentum. I do think
the Jim Clyburn endorsement in the final few days really helped him a lot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. David Chalian talked about it earlier in the exit polls, that people saying it was either the most important factor or a very significant factor. But there's no question about that. If you just look at the map that's filling in, if you look over our shoulders, every county is filling in Joe Biden blue. This is a blowout, which is this is more than Biden thought he was going to get, I think, and it's just what he needed. I do think the fascinating conversations now are going to be in the other campaigns. Elizabeth Warren is in Texas tonight. She just gave a speech where she congratulated Joe Biden, but then she criticized him, saying he wants to cut deals with Mitch McConnell. That's not what we want. And then by the day, she is getting more personal in her criticism of Senator Sanders, which has always been with the progressives, have more of a break. She criticized Senator Sanders as well. So clearly, as the other candidates try to decide what do we do next, it's not tonight for Elizabeth Warren. She has now come in third, fourth, and fifth. That's tough.
Yeah. And looking ahead to Super Tuesday, there's another thing. Ryan Nobles was talking about how the Sanders campaign didn't expect to win, but they didn't expect to be trounced the way they were tonight. And it's not just the overall number, it is with the black vote. And David Chalian mentioned earlier exit polls that are, in the teens when it comes to what Sanders did with the black vote, which is not unlike how he did 4 years ago with Hillary Clinton, where she just demolished him with that group. And it's not just about South Carolina. If you look at Super Tuesday, you were looking at 6 southern states, whereas we talked about earlier, that African American vote is going to be absolutely huge, and it is going to continue to be huge for it. The Biden campaign hopes it's going to continue to be huge for him. But the flip side of that is that if Bernie Sanders can't show that he can do well with African Americans, it is going to hurt him big time here. The saving grace for him on Super Tuesday is that he has Texas and he has California, which are the biggest hauls for delegates. And he, according to the polls, he's going to do quite well there. But when it comes to the overall Democratic electorate and Joe Biden making the case that his base of support is more reflective of Democrats, certainly helps him when you look at how not just he did in South Carolina, but how Bernie Sanders didn't do.
Remember how important it was when the PT boat Bernie Sanders was posing a major threat to the aircraft carrier Hillary Clinton 4 years ago. Everybody thought, wow, where's this coming from? Everybody underestimated Sanders all along. It was the African American vote in the South that was key to her regrouping, including the big South Carolina one she had 4 years ago, was the key to her regrouping after getting stunned by the size of the Sanders win in New Hampshire. So we'll see if that plays out to that point. Bobby Scott, congressman from Virginia, tonight announcing his endorsement of Joe Biden. So will there be a rally around Biden among other African American leaders who saw Jim Clyburn step forward for Joe Biden, saw Jim Clyburn help? The exit polls certainly say quite a bit. That'll be something fascinating to watch in the next
Terry
couple of days.
McAuliffe, the former governor,
Right.
CNN contributor, he endorsed Biden. Tim Kaine, the senator, he endorsed Biden. Virginia's a big prize coming up on Tuesday. Now, what happens on Tuesday if Amy Klobuchar doesn't carry her home state of Minnesota and Elizabeth Warren doesn't carry her home state of Massachusetts?
It's going to be very bad for them. The Klobuchar campaign seems more bullish than the Warren campaign about the notion of carrying their home states. And you heard Jeff Zelony's excellent reporting earlier about when they're looking at the math from the Biden campaign perspective about the need for those two to stay in order to keep Bernie Sanders' delegate count lower, because those are two, prime states for him because they tend to have more progressives. Bernie Sanders did incredibly well in Minnesota, for example, 4 years ago. But one other quick thing I want to mention, I was talking about the African American vote. The other thing is the generational divide, which continues to be huge across ethnic groups. Bernie Sanders continues to do incredibly well among younger voters, and Joe Biden doesn't. Now, lucky for Joe Biden, in most of these states, historically, young voters there aren't as many of them as the older voters. And that is why Bernie Sanders, at every single rally he has, you hear him say, we have to increase turnout because increasing turnout means we're bringing out new voters / young voters, and that is going to help us.
Because in every election in the United States historically, older voters have voted in much bigger proportion than younger voters.
And so this was part of the Sanders' success in 2016 when he surprised in places. And I think it's an open question in this campaign, in the sense that if you look at Iowa, very narrowly won from the delegate perspective by Pete Buttigieg. Sanders a close second there, not overwhelming. New Hampshire, a state Sanders was expected to win, he just barely won. Nevada, he had a blowout victory on the back of the Latino vote. And so now you go, and Joe Biden with a blowout tonight where Sanders underperforming, way underperforming what he thought he would get.
And they worked really hard.
Yeah, what he thought he would get among African Americans. So now you have a battle. Latinos and African Americans, the core diverse constituents of the Democratic Party, huge in California, the Latino population, huge in Texas, the Latino population, advantage Sanders there. Biden's going to come in now with a bounce. He believed he had significant African American support anyway. Now he thinks that gets magnified by this resounding victory in South Carolina tonight. So we're going to watch this play out on Tuesday. One other thing, you just talked about Senator Klobuchar and Senator Warren. I also think this is testing time for Mayor Buttigieg, in the sense that he's already made history as an openly gay candidate for president who has won a state and has had significant support. But it's all about trajectory when you get to this point of a campaign. First in Iowa, second in New Hampshire, third in Nevada, fourth in South Carolina. That's going in the wrong direction. So what do you look at? Where does he, if he can't get wins on Tuesday, where can he get a significant delegate haul to say, I have reasons to stay in?
Yeah, it's going to be wild on Tuesday. 14 states with an enormous amount of delegates, plus American Samoa, but enormous amount of delegates. We're all going to be here. It's going to be and it could be decisive too. It could be a critical moment for all of these candidates. All right,
March Madness.
We're going to have a lot more on what's going on in South Carolina, but looking ahead to Super Tuesday, 3 days from now. We'll be right back.
Business never sleeps. As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, journalist, global market analyst, and host of CNN's newest business show, First Move. Join me in the financial capital of the world for a market-moving perspective on the news influencing global politics, culture, and finance. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate
unpredictable environment and news races around the world at breakneck speed. Are you playing with fire? My show brings you the latest news and top newsmakers. Guten Tag. Hello. How are you?
I do not understand the United States.
And we also dive below the headlines to explore vital issues impacting our lives.
It's about right and wrong.
Does love have a chance of winning?
I've always believed that. Aman Paul, only on CNN.
The fact that I'm even standing here in Ashgabat really is quite something. Snow has arrived in Sochi. So excited about Rio, so focused. What do you see as the biggest challenges? You were the overwhelming favourite heading into the final. How did the match play out for you? You're used to winning. How do you keep it going? Lewis celebrating Silverstone. The game will lift women's football. I'm Amanda Davis in Rio, Doha, Pyeongchang, Moscow, Tokyo.
I feel free knowing that we live in a democratic society, but that we also have to stand up and protect it.
Freedom right now means I have to speak up.
I feel free when I get to voice what's in my heart.
To be enfranchised and supported along the way.
If you are a slave, you feel that you are not human.
Freedom requires letting go and reaching out.
And now, a moment of wonder from Great Big Story.
Skateboarding makes me feel awesome. It doesn't get boring. It's always a challenge. There's no rules. Fingerboarding and skateboarding both have that. I started fingerboarding in 4th grade. I had a lot of fun playing with the tech decks, and then I wanted to kind of improve them, and I just realized I could make them better and better. A lot of kids wanted to buy them, so I kind of put a name on it, and it grew into this huge business over time. There's hundreds of thousands of people out there that are into this.
For more stories like this, visit greatbigstory.com.
And welcome back to our continuing coverage of the South Carolina primary. I want to go to David Chalian, who is looking at some new numbers that we have been getting this evening. David?
That's right, Anderson. We are taking a look ahead to Super Tuesday to show just how important the African-American vote is now that Joe Biden has succeeded so tremendously with the African-American vote in South Carolina. What does that mean going forward to Super Tuesday? Take a look at these numbers here. 54% of the Alabama electorate in 2016 was African-American. 32% in North Carolina. 32% in Tennessee, 27% in Arkansas, 26% in Virginia. These are the top 5 states of the Super Tuesday states of the African-American vote, the share of the electorate that African-Americans make up in these states. These top 5 states, they make up more than a quarter of the electorate. This is where you're going to look to see if Joe Biden can take tonight's South Carolina success and actually convert this into victories and big delegate hauls out of these states. And just one final note on this, Anderson. It's not just do well with the black vote because they're an important part of the Democratic base. I just want to remind everyone, the way the delegates are awarded, the districts that perform best for Democrats get more delegates to award. And those are heavily African-American districts. So it's not just do well with this key part of the base. It is part of the delegate math that is so important as these candidates are seeking to get 1,991 delegates.
David Chalian, we'll come back to you shortly. Van Jones, when you look at what lies ahead for Super Tuesday, assuming there is now momentum for Joe Biden, does it carry over in the African-American populations of the state?
Look, my conversations with African Americans are that we're pretty much like everybody else. People are still making up their minds. It's very, very late. People are still like, well, I was thinking about this person last week or somebody else. And so I do think that a big vote of confidence like this is not a minor win. This is a blowout win. I think will have an impact on a lot of people who have not voted yet. I've got family in Tennessee. I got one cousin, he was for Bloomberg until Bloomberg got on the debate stage, and he was for Bernie until Bernie started saying like he was praising Fidel Castro. He's probably going to wind up back with Bernie, with Biden. I think a lot of African Americans will take some direction from this kind of blowout win.
Alexander, David Axelrod earlier was saying, you look at the percentage of African American vote that Bernie Sanders got this time around in South Carolina, not much different than what he got against Hillary Clinton 4 years ago. Does that concern you moving forward?
Well, I mean, I think that it's also important to put things into context, which is that, nationally, right, Bernie Sanders, at least from recent polling, as recent as a couple of days ago, he is doing well with the African American community. It doesn't understate and take away from the fact that Joe Biden had a really excellent night tonight. But I think, like what I was talking about before, which is this focus on defeating Donald Trump. Bernie Sanders has this unique ability, I think, to not just build this sort of younger, multiracial, multi-generational coalition on one side, but he's also able to capture the sort of white working class votes, as we saw here in South Carolina tonight. So he also won the young African American vote, which we're seeing consistently. So I think headed into Super Tuesday, especially, in the same way that it seems like Joe Biden has this firewall with black voters, I think Bernie Sanders also has a firewall with Latino voters when it comes to California, when it comes to Texas. And so I think, I don't know if that tonight blunders that, considering that he's going to pick up some delegates and is still in the lead.
Governor, to Alexander's point, does it concern you when you look at the numbers Gloria pointed out earlier of Joe Biden among non-college educated white voters in South Carolina? Bernie Sanders, I think, was better.
31-26, yeah.
31-26?
Well, it was 31-23, but it's now 26.
Yeah.
Oh,
So it's gotten
Yeah,
closer.
it's gotten tighter. Yeah.
Listen, the big win, and I've been saying this on the show for a long time, once we move the African American community, which is the heart of our party, who can win that should be the nominee. I've always said of the Democratic Party. Joe Biden proved tonight that's with him. But, we got a lot of contests going forward. I've always said for Senator Sanders, the challenge for him is to expand his coalition, show that he can win in the African American community. Now we've got these other southern states coming up, and that's what he has to prove to us, because you're putting a coalition together to get ready to run in the general election against Donald Trump. You need excitement, you need enthusiasm, and I think tonight people were really fired up. This was a big night for him. It was a great speech for him, and it gave him momentum.
Nobody matches Bernie, though, for enthusiasm. Let's be honest. Let's not get too excited on a Saturday night. Nobody.
To that point, to that point, one thing you have to consider is California and Texas have been voting. So whatever bump that Joe Biden is going to get out of tonight is lost on those voters, because California's been voting for 3 weeks, and they have obviously the bundling program, where you can go around and grab people's ballots, which is very controversial in that state, especially to Republicans. But in a primary, what that matters is who has the energy to have a volunteer base that can go and organize things. Just the stories I've been reading on what Sanders has been able to do with Latinos. So we're talking about African Americans. That is obviously hugely important as an observer of the democratic process. But the Latino vote is hugely important too, especially in California. And Sanders has, I think, a huge advantage on the ground in organization, and that really matters in campaigns. And they've been voting for 3 weeks.
One interesting thing will be on this early vote question. What we've seen in a lot of these early races is people have been holding back because they're not quite sure what the right vote to cast is, because they do want to beat Trump. And I'll be interested to see if that is true in California as well, and if there are people who are voting later than they normally would, to see how this whole thing.
Well, the numbers we can see it. The numbers are up. But they're up everywhere. So that doesn't mean we don't know how up they are, because you have to wait and see till you see the whole population. But compared to 16 and other elections, as we've seen in every election in the last 3 years, everyone's motivated, everyone's fired up. So far, what we see in Texas and California is the numbers are up.
Well, this timing for Biden couldn't be better, because it's 3 days before Super Tuesday. If you're going to turn out voters who, particularly African Americans, who are going to look at what happened in South Carolina and say, I'm with them and I'm with him, because they made a difference and they changed, perhaps, the course of the presidential race. So it clearly could affect turnout. The question, I think, and the answer we don't know about Bernie Sanders and turnout, is that Bernie Sanders has said that he can establish a Democratic coalition that will turn out that is different, that it's younger, et cetera, but it will be there in larger numbers. And we haven't seen that. We've seen moderate increases, but we haven't seen Barack Obama 2008 kind of increases in turnout. And I think that's worrisome.
Well, I think that it depends on the state. So I think Iowa was an example where it did not reach the 2008 levels, but it did surpass 2016. New Hampshire was also a huge increase from 2008 for 2020. or Nevada, I'm sorry, and New Hampshire as well. So I think that it's a little bit early to be able to see that, but I think it's what we're saying, right? It's not just about moderation; it's also about motivation, and that's going to be, pretty pivotal heading into.
I think what we're going to find is the value of a news cycle, because it's too late for Joe Biden to convert the success of tonight into money that he could put on the airwaves, obviously in time for Tuesday.
오늘은 여기까지만 하겠습니다.
Rough ride for him in the first three
점심
states.
먹고 나갈 준비해야
The
돼요.
fact that those were 3 tough goings, and then to rebound in this state, based largely on the strength of African American voters who hung with him, suggests to me that they'll be hanging with him again in the states that are about to unfold. Their faith in him wasn't shaken by